comrades in arms in defense of people's republics. The people should and to be able to govern themselves. I was watching a program from Asia, and there was a brief showing in reference to what I consider to be the top diplomat. And if that country doesn't realize who he is, or not being able to recognize him, because I think he should lead, or definitely be on a group as far as bringing an end to this state of war on the Korean Peninsula. In my opinion, as great as he hasn't forgotten his youth days, and can prove he hasn't forgotten, etc. Now, as far as yours truly, it's very difficult for a son to tell a father maybe what's best. Especially when the father's 87. However, what's better is better, and that should be the deciding factor. Now, it appears to me that who decided those islands on the west coast of the peninsula should be whose. I can see the one that Doug used to invade, but what about the ones that are north of that line? How come they're not part of the North Korea? I'm saying this from memory. There's only 24 hours in a day, but I took a quick look, and it just seemed as though I have to wonder who owns those islands. If they don't, then they should use diplomacy and say, well, we can obtain peace here. If not, we have a right to occupy those islands to defend ourselves. Isn't that correct? Now, I have to say that to make a long story brief, just from memory, as fast as I can, I started Little League Baseball, got baseball coast to coast in the U.S. I got the Lakers to have a championship. I was a key factor. The Lakers obtaining championship team. When this was, I even told thanks. I said, well, I formed a team. This is from players that maybe didn't graduate from college or never went to college, but I thought were real good. And what this team, from what I could recruit and so forth, we would have won the championship that year and every year since. Maybe it scared them to heck, but the symbol of the NBA, they had 5-6 days, nothing. Chickened out to play my team on the quiet, just for competition. Now, I can get a team in basketball that in 1 year I'll guarantee them they'll make the playoffs. 2, especially 3 years, maybe a championship. Well, if it's not done, it appears from what I see, if in 3 years they can get a team, and 2-3 years maybe get the playoffs and about winning a championship. This would be acquiring a new team. But understand now, I got to say some history, and what was my main interest was science and inventions, so I'll say that. I was in Argentina, and I had read an article about an electrochemist who noticed that there was a rise in temperature and in pressure when he did various experiments. This electrochemist in a flask he had on his table, and he was wondering if maybe it was due to the atomic structure of the element of the palladium, the element palladium. Well, this was of my interest because a few years, at least before that, I come to the conclusion that cold fusion is the energy of the future, cold fusion. It would resolve all of the Earth's problems. Cold fusion. Who gets that first? Now, I said, well, I was in Argentina. I talked to their top scientists. And they said, well, of course, it's interesting, and they're not into cold fusion. They said the main thing is that they had just the War of the Malvinas, which the English say was the Falkland Islands, that the U.S. helped. So, boy, they gave me a tough time in Argentina. Yeah, with the U.S. they help England, and because look at it their way. And the history of warfare, as far as I know, they're the only country that went and took what they wanted to take and went out of their way not to kill anyone or even injure anyone. I think that's the only time in the history of warfare that's occurred. But what did they do, the English? They went there, all their forces, hired, I think they're the Gurkhas or something. They put a knife in their mouth. They're on drugs. He said, I thought some of the soldiers say we shoot them 4 or 5 times, they still keep coming. With a knife in their mouth, they did kill us. Notice the contrast. No. So I said, well, I'll talk to the Admiral's office, and then the Navy Department, which happened to be in the Casa Rosada. It was a door adjacent to the president's office, and a distinguished military man said, well, you know what, he says, I'm a naval military man. He said, but you want to use my chemist in these experiments? And I said, yeah, and I'll keep the cost at a minimum. He said, well, I don't really know what you're, as far as the science. He says, I understand the importance. He says, but I have to be blunt. We're financially embarrassed. We're broke, that War of the Malvinas. Meanwhile, I suddenly am pushed aside, and it's definitely American, goes before me to talk to the Admiral. And I think there's some kind of a deal where I had mentioned that if we published that paper first, we would make $10 million. And I think it was the Admiral now, if I remember. He looked and he says, oh, Dr. Castellano, he says, let's be with $10 million. I says, yeah, the importance of being first. And he says, well, I don't think so. He says, but we're financially broke. Something about that, and they $10 million deal, and it was definitely American, went before me, and that's the way it was. So before I left, they were giving me a tough time because I was from the USA. The USA, they helped the English. Boy, I talked to some soldiers there that the police there. One of them, his brother was murdered. He's murdered. Oh man, he gave me a tough time. So I said, look, you and I are going to go round and round. You got me here in jail. I can't understand your Spanish. You don't understand the Spanish. I can try. You don't understand English, and you don't understand a darn thing about mathematical physics and cold fusion. You have to get at least somebody who understands English. Get me a top interpreter. To my surprise, in walks the interpreter for the president of Argentina, distinguished gentleman, speaks English. I had to apologize for my English, really. And he said, well, I understand what you're all saying now. And he said, well, I don't doubt you, Dr. Castellano. He says, I understand that Hoover, in all those years, got so much power. He could do all these crimes. He says, we know that Hoover is a bad man. He says, so you can go anywhere now in Argentina, I'll authorize it. I says, anywhere? And he says, anywhere. I says, how about what you call your Los Alamos like they have in the U.S.? He says, okay. So I talked to the man, and he said, he looked English, and he spoke like an English accent. And he had studied, I think, in Yale. He says, why should I hire you when I can hire my friends up there? And I think he said Yale. And I said, well, why just hire your friends in Yale? Why one friend? Why hire them all? And then get all of the equipment, all of this $1 million of equipment, and all of the scientists from the U.S. Get them all down here with you. And what will you have? The same thing they have up there. They've been spinning around for years, and all they're doing is maybe copying, and you're trying to read what they have and understand what they have and copy them. He looked at me and he said, well, you're kind of bold. And I said, well, you're forcing me to be. He said, well, I'll think about it, but I don't think so. Bye. No. I talked to some friends, and I said, look, in my opinion, in 10, 15 years, you're going to become a rich fat cat. Understand what I'm saying? He looked at me and he says, well, why don't you work for us and come over there? And I says, oh, I can't right now. So we parted as sincere friends. Now, all these years, they don't know who I am. So I explained it to them. And you know what they tell me? You should have took the offer back then. Now, how smart are these? There's this smart department, use that term, that they, after these years, they don't know me or don't know the situation, don't know the importance, and said I should have took the offer back then. So I say, maybe these fellows have to wise up. Well, let's look at what's current. Oh, yeah, maybe 15 minutes, and I'm almost at 12. Right now, I can get them a basketball team that in 1-2 years, maybe they have the championship. They say, well, think about it, I guess, don't even answer. They have, from my hometown, Italian descent fellas that caused very hard conditions and interfered with what I could do in basketball. And they're paying for it. You're pretty smart. You're a smart department. Somebody is kind of smiling at that. SARS. So I'm forced to say I got to get in warmer climate. Time, there's a proverb in philosophy, time and tide wait for no man. At my age, I'm going to get where it's warm. My main interest and challenge is that of theology, the study of all beliefs. But I'm going to force myself to maybe pay a little attention to my cold fusion. That Pons and Fleischmann, I think may have been in Argentina at that time. The paper is exactly the same. What I told him, made $10 million. They got an Italian descent man from my hometown, Rochester, New York, to viciously ridicule him and degrade him. He got so angry, he took the money and went to France, because he was French descent. He says, hey, you tried to beat me? I scooped you. On that paper that I talked years ago with Argentina's thinking. And he's waiting for Japan and France. Those are true facts. Now, how smart are you, smart department, that you can't recognize who the top diplomat is? And he can prove he's a sincere man from when he was a young man. He can prove that. Absolutely. To head or be. Where is this line that was drawn, and why, by who? And what rights do you have to the land above that line? That you can maybe move and then bargain from that power, a little more power position. Yeah, let's get peace or let's end. I'm for ending this state of war in the Korea Peninsula. Yeah, that's a challenge. No way out for this USA that you won't sign a peace treaty. That's the facts. Thank you.